as she said, it is my first public speaking event at this type of event. I do speak some to our local church youth group, and so this should be real easy compared to that. So anyway, yeah, I'm a little bit nervous. It is my first time. So one of the things that someone told me one time is to open with a joke, and it kind of helps relax everyone. And didn't really work that good for me, so I kind of joked around the whole time. So anyway, half my jokes are stolen, and half are funny. So we'll let you guys decide if there's any connection between the two. So anyway, one of the things you need to know about me is that, whoa, see, that's awesome. Anyway, so one of the things you need to know about me is I have ADHD. And I don't suffer from it though, but everyone around me does. And one thing about ADHD is it really gives me a lot of energy to try new things and willingness to try new things because I'm tired of this old stuff already. So I look at it as a strength, and I can also be pretty proud of my disorder. You guys with OCD have a problem because you can't stand disorder. So anyway, as she said, my name is Vance McCoy. We're really going through the presentation here. My home is, Harry, if you could go to slide number 2, please. So I'm first generation farmer, I say, but I'm actually fifth. So my great-great-grandfather on McCoy's side homesteaded in southwest Nebraska, around the Elsie area. And I started out on that homestead. This is not it. This is where I live now. But I started out on the homestead in the mid-90s, and 5 years later, I was moving to a new homestead and communicating with my family.
She can't hear, so just give her a signal when you want to advance.
All right, so stop looking at the screen because she thinks I want to advance.
There you go.
Anyway, so 5 years later, I was moving and communicating with my family through lawyers. And so I say I'm fifth generation, and I'm also first generation because I started kind of from scratch after a few years of being on the family farm. And so with that background, I think I have some things to share. So the name of my speech is The Power of a Question, Changing Minds to Change the Future. I don't have all the answers. I may not have a lot of answers, but I do have questions, and questions that you can ask, that I can ask, that will help us maybe think through things in a different way, and to just really maybe break the traditions of how things have always been. So anyway, so slide 2 is my family. Slide 2, if we could go to slide 2. Okay, this is my family. Fortunate enough to have 2 grown sons that farm, although they don't farm with me. They kind of by design, they have their own family farming operations separate from mine. But we're all close. We talk daily. We enjoy each other as a family, and but they live within a few miles of me and my wife. And then we have a daughter and her husband that live in Idalia, Colorado, about 2 hours from us. So that's my family. Hesitant to do slideshow because just of the difficulties with it sometimes, but really proud of that slide. That's one of my proudest accomplishments, to have family close to me. So slide 3, if we could. That's where we live currently. Bought that place about 20 years ago. I joke that we live in the center of a cornfield, which most years is not a joke. We live in the center of a cornfield. That is an irrigated pivot. Those are very important in our area. We don't get a lot of rain. Those came along and really developed in early to late 70s, and there's a lot of them. So the next slide, please. So this is a zoom out. The blue dot's where I live, and that's kind of a zoom out of the Elsie area. You can see those little green dots everywhere. So pivot irrigation is pretty important. Years like this, like what you guys are having, we don't raise anything without those pivots. And as you can kind of see, they're pretty important. But part of the importance of them and part of the challenge is that it's depleting our aquifer. And I'm pretty passionate about saving those. We're pretty blessed to have them. And so a lot of what I do is focus towards saving that water, trying to lower inputs, and just trying to save the future. As Dr. Nick was talking about how we're going to feed all these people in the future, some of that is it's going to be very important not to deplete our resources now that we're going to need down the road. So I'm really passionate about lowering inputs and using less irrigation. So the name of my business is Triple Creek Cover Crops. I got into that because I was using enough of those things that it's like, man, this stuff should get shipped to me instead of me having to go get it all the time. So kind of morphed into that, and I was trying to come up with a name. And so on my farm, we're pretty spread out, but we have 3 creeks that run through there. Used to run through there. They're all dry creeks now. One of them is called the Stinking Water Creek. Used to fish out of that when I was a kid, about a mile from my house. Now it's probably 15 miles from our old homestead. Just keeps going farther down the river as the irrigation wells pull the water table lower. So anyway, that's part of the reason why I named that and why it's important to me. So one of the things, as Carrie said, one of the reasons I'm here is because I kind of met her through Facebook, and just some of the things I post, I like to post a lot of just what I'm learning and sharing with others and how to improve what we're doing. And so I am a social media junkie. So I've got a list of questions that kind of come up. It's discussions I have with people through social media or otherwise. So one of the things that always comes up is about tillage. People be fighting about no-till versus tillage and this and that. Always feels like one of the adults, and someone who wants to sound like the adult in the room says, well, you just got to do what works on your farm. So my question is, should I really do what works on my farm? So this has worked really well for a lot of farmers in our area, most of them. And there's $1 million houses, there's people are doing really well. But, you know, a lot of these places, they used to have water run past their place. But now they're living in a $1 million house by a dried up stream. So, you know, maybe doing what works for me on my farm is not always the best. And so another question I have that I get a lot is, how did I start on this journey? So I started out, like I said, I grew up on an irrigated farm. We only had irrigation. And kind of grew up with the old model of, I remember when I was this tall, rinsing pathogen jugs from my dad. And we just dumped out on the ground. We had a nice spot around our shop that didn't grow weeds. And, you know, no gloves, any of that. Well, when we moved to this place, it's in the middle of the cornfield, I started really thinking about the chemicals I was using. My kids were that size at the time. And I was like, I really don't want this stuff sprayed over the top of my house. And so I really got started looking into what these chemicals do and how they affect everything else. I'm not anti-chemical, I still use a lot of them. It's just, I try to think more holistically about how we do things. And I try to communicate that to other people just to get us to think about what we're doing. So, if I could go to slide 5. Okay, so this is a little funny thing I saw. And my wife told me that I may have to explain this to some of the younger people. Remember the Kool-Aid commercials where he comes crashing through the brick wall? So here we are. He's paying off the Kool-Aid man to get into the brick house with 3 little pigs. So on social media, I have and also in locally, I have friends that have accused me of drinking the Kool-Aid of regenerative farming. And so my question is what if Kool-Aid is what we need? What if we need to look at a different way to do things? Is there a better way to accomplish my goals? So, first thing I need to do is maybe define my goals. So first, what are my goals? And then that led me into thinking, what is a yield goal? Because yield goals get talked about a lot. I mean, when we're doing soil testing and all those things. What should our yield goal be? I mean, where should we set that? And so, to do that, we need to kind of define what yield is. So in an ag setting, we all know bushels per acre. That's kind of how we define everything, right? And we've kind of grown to think that that's all that gets to it, is bushels per acre. But when you look at definitions, so now on Google, when you Google it, it'll have different categories for what your definition is. So the first one that pops up is agriculture, the full amount of ag product, right? Then you look at economics, the amount of money brought in, the return on investment. And I think we overlook that as farmers a lot. We're just chasing that maximum yield and maybe not looking at maximum return on investment. So the really cool one, the one I get a kick out of here, was in the area of chemistry. So in the area of chemistry, yield is defined as the force in tons of TNT required to produce an equivalent explosion. So it's kind of used in the nuclear world. On a nuclear bomb, they talk about megatons or kilotons. So that's how many tons of TNT it takes to make an equivalent explosion. So highlight one of my trips that I've taken was to New Orleans, and I went to the World War II Museum. I'm kind of a history junkie. And I'll just never forget, you go through there and they've got all kinds of displays and all kinds of equipment that they used in the war and stuff. When you come to the end, there's a huge wall, and it's just got a great big mural picture of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it's just cities, huge cities that are just completely level. And so that was the yield of splitting it out, and it changed the world forever. So it got me to thinking about biology and soil health, and the bomb in Hiroshima was a 15 kiloton bomb, so that's 15,000 tons of TNT. Like I said, it changed the world just from splitting them out. So when you look at the biology in our soil, and it's just very powerful what natural substances can do. And when you look at the biology, I really believe that when we get our soil right, that will change the world. And as Nick talked about, just raising those crops for the future. And I believe one of the things that we're going to need to look at is not raising corn. We're going to be moving into raising food for people. And anyway, so one of the things, I picked this up, I don't remember one of the speakers I heard at one of these conferences said, I had to change my mindset from what am I going to kill today to what am I going to help live today. So, helping that biology live is a very important part of what we're going to need to do in regenerative farming. So, next slide 6, please. Okay, this one I just found kind of funny because it's just clever marketing. I mean, I don't know if they really believe this or not. It says insects have been damaging crops since the dawn of time. That ends now. I mean, do we really believe that we're going to spray a product and we're never going to have insect issues again? I don't think so. I don't know that anybody really believes that. But it is slick marketing because it helps, it really helps illustrate how I've been grown up to think. I mean, that's kind of what we do on the farm. We go out, if there's a problem, we go kill it. You know, and nothing against this company, it might be a great product, but it just illustrates to me how we've grown up thinking maybe that we need to change our mindset to helping things live. So, next slide, please. Okay. So I just didn't want to go all on that last slide. So, but anyway, a few more things to talk about there. So, talking about things that we've learned, things that we've grown up knowing that may be challenged. So a statement I hear a lot is that they say. So one of my questions is who are they? You know, are they experts? And so I got a little joke about experts. Just split it down into two phrases. An X is a has-been, and a spurt is a drip under pressure. So that's just a joke. I mean, there are experts who we need to listen to and who will help us. There's several in this room. And there are people that can help us, but we also need to question what people are telling us. And just like one of Nick's slides talked about, regenerative farming promises a lot. You know, yeah, we're not going to be able to just quit fertilizer cold turkey. We've got to replace the nutrients some way. And but we need to really question about what people are telling us. Don't put people up on a pedestal. You know, like I told you, I don't have all the answers. One of the reasons I'm nervous to be here is, I know everything's not perfect back home. My farm isn't perfect. I've got some weeds. I've got some bugs. I've got some issues out there. I don't have perfectly healthy soil. I haven't built my organic matter where I want it to be. So that's a lot of what makes me nervous to speak to you guys today is just because I know back home it's not perfect. So don't put people on a pedestal. They are human. But anyway, some of the things that they say that we need to maybe challenge and really think about are, numbers like it takes X amount of nitrogen to make so many bushels of corn. It takes so much water to make so much corn. These are kind of unique to your situation, your context. The soil testing is a very important thing. Just learning what your farm is doing. And in that aspect, it is important to do what works on your farm. So another question I get asked a lot are about cover crops, since I do sell them. And people have the assumption that they take a lot of moisture and nutrients. And my question is on the nutrient side, if you're raising a cover for cover and it falls to the ground, where do the nutrients go? And so one of the statements, or one of my sayings that I've come up with that I like to use is that cover crops borrow moisture and nutrients, but they pay it back with interest. And I really believe that to be true, that if you're building your organic matter over time, or even in short term, if you've got your residue out there, you can catch these rains, you can catch everything that falls, and it doesn't run off, it's going to pay you back. And but there is a long-term and a short-term return on those. We have, in my area, we're having normal rainfall, which isn't a lot for us, but the last 2 years, 2022 was the driest on record. And it kind of was hard to be a cover crop salesman when you're the driest year on record. But I think, we showed some things that can work. And, I had some new customers that tried it for the first time. I feel bad I sold them anything because they'll probably never be back. But, context is very important. We don't do a lot of cover crops on our non-irrigated land. It's more of a rotational thing. But our irrigated land, we're pushing covers pretty hard. And I really feel like that building organic matter on those irrigated fields over time is going to be very important. And especially as the water supply dwindles, we have the ability to hold more and store more water and get it to infiltrate, we're going to be a lot better off. Another thing they say is it takes a long time to build organic matter. I think there's people in this room, myself included, that have proven that to be wrong. You can really build organic matter in a hurry if you're managing things right. Another one that I've heard that kind of paralyzes people, I think, is that it takes a long time to reverse the effects of pollution. One I saw, an article I saw about nitrates in the water was that, if we stop putting nitrates in the water now, that it takes so many years to, well, it almost gets you thinking, well, what's the point? But I feel like, just back to my biological side of things, I feel like nature is more resilient than we give it credit for. And we just need to start doing the right things and let nature take care of itself. All right, now to this slide. This is a little comment here. It says, "Dad, can I use some extra money?" "Yeah, sure." And so he gives the lawnmower to use extra money, and so he puts the lawnmower up for sale. So I'm kind of passionate about. So I lost my dad when I was 15, and I'm kind of passionate about the father-son relationship. My sons farmed with me for a few years, and then they separated out their businesses, like I said, by design. But how was poor design, because now I'm getting old and I don't have help. But anyway, I'm pretty passionate about this father-son relationship, and I get this question a lot from people who buy cover crop or who are thinking about trying cover crops or regenerative farming. Well, how do I convince my dad? So one of my questions is your dad really the problem, or are you afraid to try it and you're just throwing dad under the bus, using him as an excuse? And I see there's cases on both sides of that, but another question I have, so for the younger people in this room, I'd like to see a show of hands. How many of you have never disobeyed your dad? Okay? So, just something to think about. I need to try some things, but I really feel like, and I tell people though, have respect for your dad. I mean, he didn't get to where he was at by doing everything wrong. Have some respect. Don't think you're going to go change everything. But I really feel like you need to be asking your dad questions like, things about how it was when he was your age. I think human nature has had a little bit of a tendency to think that things are always, the way things are now, have always been that way, and they always will be that way. It's kind of, we get that stuck in our head that we think. When you ask Dad, kind of how it was 30, 40 years ago, and they start really thinking about how things have changed, that they get more open to change. And just try things on a small scale. So there's a picture of me. I read this, I think, in Gabe Brown's book and saw it on YouTube about the same time, so I'm like, I gotta try it. So you just lay out your sweet potatoes on the ground and roll out a bale of hay. Call it good. And so when you go to dig the potatoes, you just pull up the plant and it out. And it's super fun. And talking about feeding the world, little plot, 20 by 20 plot, sweet potatoes and a hay bale feeds way more potatoes than we want. We can them, we give them to friends. So there's ways to do things with less labor, less inputs. I mean, we water them, some, mostly because my wife is uptight about that. But I just let them go. But anyway, so tell you that story because after my dad died, I had a mentor that kind of took me in. And he was a tillage guy. So I worked for him for several years. And my job was to drive the tillage machine. Me and another early teens, young 20s, would run those tillage machines 24/7. I mean, this guy was a tillage guy, and he would love it. And he's up in his 80s now. Sorry. Just a really good friend of mine. Well, I was kind of hesitated to tell him stuff like this that I do because he thinks I'm nuts. So anyway, but I told him about these potatoes, and he went home and he tried it, and he's telling everybody about these potatoes. So you just never know what small thing you try is going to have an effect on the people in your life that might change their mind about the way that we've been doing things. So anyway, so now I'm going to address the dads in the room for your sons. and daughters that maybe want to try something different. So, dads, you know, if your son or daughter doesn't ask you these questions, ask yourself these questions. You know, what are my goals? What do I want my farm to look like when I'm gone, or before I'm gone? You know, do I want to wait till I'm gone to turn it over, or do I want to have my sons and daughter, you know, take some responsibility and do some things? And you know, be honest with yourself. Be honest with your children about what your goals are. I mean, don't string them along until you're in the rest of them and then just turn it over to them. I mean, and if your dad is honest with you and he says, no, I'm just going to keep control of it, you know, maybe move on, really. I mean, it's kind of, I've experienced a lot of things with this, with family dynamics. And sometimes you gotta face facts. If your dad's a jerk, probably not gonna be better when he's 80. So just some things to think about. But dads, so here's a story. My son, when he first came back from college, he rented some land, and I had all the equipment, so they were working for me. They'd use my equipment, and mostly I ran it. But one day, I was busy, so my son's running the planter, he's planting his ground, and I came to the field to check on it, and he just had it so screwed up. We were using GPS, so we strip till at the time. You make a strip till, and then you come back another trip with the planter later. He had his GPS 15, we plant 30-inch rows, he had his GPS 15 inches off. So he's planting out there in the middle of all the trash. And I mean, I can see seeds on top of the ground. And I'm not telling you this story because I'm proud of it. I'm not proud of what I did that day. Sorry. I'll never forget it. I hope he has. Sorry. I say I'm passionate. I mean, so I'm not proud of the things I said to him that day. I ran him down, I chewed him out, and I was so upset. I was about to have a stroke over his corn. I get in the vehicle, and I'm just shaking. And my wife says to me, "What are you so upset about? It's his corn." And at that point, I realized these guys are going to have to learn on their own. I can't do everything for them. I can't control. I'm going to destroy my relationship with them. I'm going to destroy my health if I don't change. So, love your children. Wish and pray for their success. Don't get in their way. Let them make some mistakes. Another show of hands. How many of you dads in the room have never created a learning opportunity for yourselves? Okay, we make mistakes, we'll learn from them. You know, that's somewhat, but I think as dads, we fear that so bad that our children might fail. And one of the things, I did a podcast with Pastor Christopher back here, and we talked about stewardship. You know, one of the things about stewardship is that I'm given this opportunity for a short time to take care of something that God has given me. And He's just given me the opportunity and the responsibility to take care of it for a time. And when I'm gone, He's going to give that to someone else. And then it becomes their responsibility. I don't have to control everything. I just have to be responsible for setting it up the best I can for the future. All right, so slide 8, please. Okay, so this question is how do I break farming norms, which, translated, that means what's different on my farm from others. So not probably a lot different on my farm from other regenerative farms, but in my neighborhood, pretty different. So I took a little trip this spring. I had to drop off some seed down at Green Cover. late, and I had to pick some up. And so it's probably third week of April, and I took a trip from my place to there is about 2.5 hours. And I counted about 3 green fields between mine and theirs on that trip. Not counting mine or green peppers, but in between, I counted about 3 fields in not many miles that had what I would call cover crops on. So we got a ways to go on this cover crop deal. I believe in it. So here's some pictures of some wacky stuff that my neighbors drive by and just probably think, and gives me hesitation because I'm trying to convince these guys that this is the way to go, and sometimes this does not look like the way to go. So anyway, upper middle picture there. So a lot of times we'll plant our cover crops in the fall, so that particular field got planted to rye or probably angry Dutch in the mix. And in our area, there's very few things that will overwinter, and rye is one of them, so we use a lot of it. And so I modified my drill. This bottom one is not the drill that did that job. But anyway, I modified it so that I can just plant these in strips. So the idea is that I come back in and see in this bottom picture where I came back in and planted the corn in between there. That's a no-till situation, but it gives me an opportunity to let that rye get a little bit more growth and not compete with my corn. You know, a lot of these, I've seen a lot of discussion this year with it being dry of people talking about you can't plant rye ahead of corn, it's a terrible idea. We do a lot of it, and it really works out fairly well. It's not something I recommend for a brand new beginner on planting, but it's something that I've tried to modify that works for me. Our land is super sandy. My highest organic matter field, and this is one that I've worked with, it started in 2015, it was 1.7%, that was my highest organic field. Now it's to 2.8, just from continually having living rip and changing some of our other practices. But anyway, so that's one of the things I do. And then this drill here, we modify to plant covers in between the corn rows when the corn's about that tall. It's not something I've done a lot of, it's something I'm working with, trying to just get it tweaked. We really have issues with herbicide carryover. Last year I was really bragging on my cover crop in between the corn rows, and a lot of it got up that tall and died. I think it's probably atrazine carryover. So, then up the right there, I make a lot of my own biological fertilizers, and so that is Johnson seed compost. One of the things I've done, I don't have any ideas myself, I steal them from other people, but this one's one I kind of came up with. That I've got all these bags, in the seed cover business, I've got all these bags that are just throwing away. I'm just going to use those to make my Johnson seed compost here. So that's kind of new for this year, doing that. This picture here was a field that in, I want to say 2019, I let that rye get up about that tall. This is a non-irrigated field, which for our area, this is stupid. You don't do this. I lucked out. Got the rye up that tall, roller crimped it, or planted it, roller crimped it, and sprayed it. That field had 0 fertilizer. And it didn't have carryover fertilizer from the year before because it had 0 fertilizer that year. It had soybeans. And so it's a little hard to see, but that non-irrigated corn in our area, if you make 100 bushels, you're pretty happy with that. That field made 90. Very low inputs. So I get pretty excited about these inputs. And next year I tried it. We don't want to talk about that one. The next year is bad. But it just shows what can be done. And then down on the left side, so I raise miniature cattle. It's kind of a hobby. And people ask why, and I said, well, it's because it's time to downsize. But seriously, my boys, when they split off their operations, I was doing it by myself. And those of you who work cattle, It's never enjoyable to work cattle, but at least if you have some help, you have somebody to test out. But if you're doing it by yourself, it's just no fun. So I got rid of the cows and I just kept those. But I want to talk about young people for an opportunity. Those things, you can grass fatten them, and they make, I call them fun-sized steaks. They make the best little steaks, and people go nuts over these things. For young people that are trying to get into farming, that's one of the things that they say, is that you can't get into farming without help. There's an opportunity for young people. Direct market beef, just as an internship or whatever. It's a good way to spin off another operation for young kids, for young people. All right, so those are some of the goofy stuff I'm doing, and I could show you pictures all day. And as Carrie said, I did a lot of research. Most of my research is a mistake that I made that I correct, so that I take this portion of the field and call that research. So I've got a lot of impromptu test plots. One of those that I'm pretty proud of, back to the biofertilizer thing, so I had this cleaning seed, I separate a lot of olive crops. So I raised, for instance, one of the things I raise is hairy vetch for seed, and I'll raise a cereal with it because it just really works well. And so I separated the seeds. Well, one of the other things I had some buckwheat that got a lot of Palmer amaranth in it. So I was cleaning that. So I had these pro boxes full of Palmer amaranth. And I was messing around, and so I decided to make a hydrolysate out of Palmer amaranth seed. And so, talking about that, I successfully made a hydrolysate. It smells wonderful. It tastes good. I think you could probably get pretty drunk off this stuff. And anyway, so I went out. One of the most important tools I have, and back to the thing about young people, proving it to your dad, is a hand sprayer. I went out and just did a 20 by 20 plot, hand sprayed it. Didn't kill my corn. I was super excited. I did a bricks test, and it jumped a couple bricks. So anyway, I tried it on a large scale, and it didn't work, so I'm back to square one. So I might be drinking it. Anyway, so slide 9, please. My view on tillage, I'm going to be brief. That's just kind of a joke. It has its place. You know, the soil health principles are not tillage or non-tillage. They're about disturbance. And there's a lot of other ways we can disturb the soil besides tillage. That's number one. But on the left, there's a picture. I'm not against tillage. I love to have those earthworms do the tillage for me. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so my last slide is just the question, am I ready to go where this takes me? So that picture there is, you know, so many people tell you how great it is. That picture there, my corn's on the left, my neighbor's corn is on the right. Okay, just put that in there to show you that what I'm doing is a little bit different. I'm lowering inputs. He's shooting for 300 bushel corn probably. He might get it. I am not. I have to sometimes kind of remind myself that what I'm doing is different, and it may not always look better, but I really believe that getting our soil in line is the future. And some things that I want to try to get better on are using less chemicals, more soil sampling and testing to figure out what I need fertility-wise, and irrigation efficiency. You know, as I started out talking about, one of the things I'm passionate about is saving that irrigation for future use, future people. And also the roller crimping covers, I'm really trying to get that perfected. I haven't yet, to try to eliminate our chemical use. So I pretty well used up all my time, but if there's any just real quick questions, keep in mind lunch is coming. There we go, Jonathan. The first sample I took the word, I hadn't let it cook long enough, and yeah, I didn't have a lot, like less than 1%. So no, not a lot. but I've got some now that's cooked longer, and I need to get it sampled. But I was fairly disappointed. You know, I got a 1 or 2 point jump in bricks when I used it, and then I loaded up the sprayer, had some people helping me, and so I added some fish I could always ate, and I came in the house that night smelling like a drunk fisherman. It was so much fun, but I really didn't get too much response. So we're back to doing some more testing and seeing what happens, but it's a fun project. Just kind of shows you what can be done. I mean, when you think outside the box, I guess, what's possible. Anyone else? No. So one of the things I say is every operation needs one lazy man in the group because you figure out a better way to do things. When I followed the original Johnson stew, that's a lot of work. So I immediately started looking for an easier way to do it, and that's pretty easy. I mean, I hold that up the skid loader and I hold that up the forklift and dump the ingredients in with the skid loader. And then if I got a dry product, so I had some seed cleanings that was dry, I just set that in a tote full of water and let it soak for a day and pulled it back out and my moisture was right. So yeah, I have volunteered to be the lazy man that finds an easy way to come up with stuff. Anyone else? I think my time's pretty well up. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your time. Thank you to Dell and Carrie for inviting me to speak here. It's just, it's kind of a dream of mine to be able to do this. So I just say thank you, everyone.